Before 2013, I felt like a lone voice in the wilderness about the maligned, the enemy of the world, dismissed by so many, only to then be overjoyed that the recovery of the story in its entirety allowed the world to have a fresh take on what proved to be an exciting departure from the norm. There were other stories that I felt similarly about, that if people could only see them, they would gain a greater appreciation for them. The Faceless ones wasn't on my list. I spoke about this episode on, March 30th, 2011. Okay, well, that explains why I didn't know that the actress who played Jean was Benedict Cumberbatch's mom. He is great in that first season of Sherlock, but it wasn't really enough for me to dive into his biography. Anyway, getting back to the story, it is much stronger than I had previously thought. The idea of having the Doctor deal with an alien crisis on contemporary Earth was a long time coming, and the presence of his companion being from centuries in the past made this an amusing juxtaposition. Besides the flying beastie stuff, Jamie being blown away at the idea of a ticket costing £28. His reaction calls to mind the $100 billion scene from Austin Powers 2. While there is a bit of repetition to this, it doesn't slow down the story as much as I felt it had before the episodes had been animated. It probably could have benefited from being shrunk down to 5 episodes, but it's definitely better than the fine that I had dismissed it as 11 years ago. This leads us to the departure of Ben and Polly. Keep in mind that Ben was only the third male companion in the series. Ian for the first and most of the second, Stephen being kept around for 1 year, and then Ben starting in the previously discussed The War Machines. What was notable was that in Season 3, after Vicky departed when her contract expired, 4 more actors played the female companion. 5 if you want to count Anne Chaplet, who was effectively the female companion for The Massacre. Katerina was ejected before she'd even arrived. Sarah was a great addition, but played by an actor who didn't want to stay. Dodo was, well, the name says it all. And then finally Polly. Polly was perhaps the most defining archetype of the female companion, at least of this era. Most of the others were in one way or another variants on the overall idea of Polly. Realizing that they'd finally worked it out after flailing about for most of Season 3, they realized the mistake they had made in removing Stephen when Peter Purves liked doing the show and was doing it so well. If you have an actor who works and a character that works, keep them around if you can. Offering Anneke Wilkes a chance to remain after 1 year, despite the overall rule, showed how stupid the rule had been. Each companion was a crapshoot, and when you found an actor and character that works, you don't get rid of them for an arbitrary reason. However, Ben was another story. It wasn't that Ben was a bad character, but he replaced Stephen, who was just brilliantly played by Peter Purves, and he shared a lot of his run with Jamie, who was the perfect partner for Troughton's Doctor. And that was the big problem. Troughton was not Hartnell. Troughton's Doctor was eccentric, while Hartnell's had grandfatherly amusement. They were very different things. Putting Ben with Hartnell partnered him as a tough everyman to contrast his intellectual and scholarly bearing. But putting him with Troughton made him the straight man to the enigmatic chessmaster fool, which was a role they didn't really need. By the time his contract was up, it was pretty obvious that he was simply surplus goods. Jamie was doing just fine in his role, Polly was doing just fine in her role, and Ben was just kind of there. So yes, in his case, the contract wasn't renewed, and Anneke Wilkes decided, in solidarity with him, not to renew either. But this time, the show wisely filmed their departure during their final episodes so that, unlike Dodo, they wouldn't leave off-screen but could have a proper goodbye, and no rumors about syphilis. Putting the Faceless ones with our previously covered episode, The War Machines, is interesting, because The War Machines felt like the first step in redefining the direction of the show, and was the episode that introduced Ben and Polly, and with the Faceless ones, that direction has now been cemented in their departure. Note the profound difference between the way the man-made threat of the War Machines shook out compared to that of the alien one of the Faceless ones. From the beginning in the War Machines, the Doctor was a man respected, moving in high circles, and with a voice frequently at least given a fair hearing. But in this story, he's a man harangued on all sides by petty bureaucrats concerned with procedures and who dismiss him out of hand even when he is announcing that he's found a dead body. The doctor's fool exterior misleads his enemies, but also means he is typically dismissed out of hand until he has proven himself. It's moving towards the base under siege stories, the leaving behind of historicals, despite the Doctor's two companions for the next year being from pre-20th century Earth, and the permanent trimming of the party size for the next 14 years. Jamie's role shows the change that's come over the Doctor's relationship with his companion. Jamie feels far more like a sidekick than other companions, and ever really will. The closest one to their relationship is probably Leela, as someone the Doctor is educating, but who also sees his tricks. Just take Jamie's reaction when the Doctor at times will begin deliberately being complex in his explanation, and Jamie's response is that he sees that he's blabbering instead of being clear on purpose. Now compare that to Leela's response to a question from the Doctor with, "You ask me so you can tell me." She sees what he's doing as well. The use of the companions for Troughton's run who are not of our time means that returns to contemporary Earth can happen with far greater frequency because there's no question of, should I get off now while I have a chance that may not come again? While The Power of the Daleks and the Macra Terror are really great stories, it's at this point that the Second Doctor's run has sorted itself out and will be one classic after the next. The Faceless ones doesn't just entertain on its own, but it reveals the potential that the show has now that it has discovered itself.